Hey, it's Lauren. Today I'm going to be talking about and reviewing the Isamaya Industrial Palette, this little beauty. So this was $115. We'll start there. I have never spent that much on a palette in my life. I have never bought like the Pat McGrath palettes or anything like that. So $115 was a lot for me to wrap my mind around spending on a palette. In this palette, there are 14 shades, and as you can see, it's a lot of like greenish shades, which is also something that I don't normally get because my eyes are green, and it always ends up feeling like a lot of green, but these colors are just very interesting, and you also have like this very vibrant red. You've got kind of this navy blue shade. There's only one brown in this palette. It's just a very interesting color story. And so I felt particularly inspired by it. And I can't say that I've really felt excited by a lot of palettes. This one is just so unique with that color story. I'm going to go ahead and swatch down my arm for you to see what that looks like on my skin. And then we will build an eye look with this palette. All right, I've got an entire armful of these shadows. Look at that metallic glisten on these. So the unique thing about this palette in particular is that there are several different types of textures going on in here. As I walk you through these shades and the names of them, I'll describe the texture a bit because you do have some more like putty type textures. There's more of like a cream, kind of soft powders. There's a lot going on here. So let's go through it. I'm gonna start up from the top of my arm here. This is the shade Leather. And this is one of the putty shades, and it's a very matte black, as you can see. You can kind of make it more smoky. This is great as either an eyeliner or a base shade. Then we have the shade Sweat, which is this sort of iridescent lilac-y blue shifting shadow. You can actually use this also on the cheekbones, which I will demonstrate. Then we have Brass, which these two are more like powder type textures, more of your traditional eyeshadow type textures. This is Grip, which is also more of a powder type texture. Motor, powder type texture. Machine, which is, it's a powder, but it almost has more of like a creamy kind of feel, which is actually really nice when you look at how metallic and shimmery it is. It helps to reduce some of that fallout that you typically get with that type of finish. This is Kukrum, which is a powder. Fetish, powder. Belt, powder. Flesh, which is a powder, and it's a very sheer kind of shimmer. It's very, very pretty. Whip, which is like a very, very metallic, it's a powder, but it's also a little bit softer, kind of like Machine, so that you don't have a ton of fallout. Diesel, which is a putty type texture, just like Leather up here, except for this one is a bit more satiny. You can see a little bit of a reflection in it, and it has a slight navy shift, which I think is really cool. This is the shade Heat, which is almost a little difficult to see. It's a very soft shade. It's definitely, I think, the softest shade of this palette, but it's kind of this yellowy base with like a greenish blue shift. And then the very last shade we have here is Initiator, which is like almost like a lime green with like a subtle gold shift to it. So overall, a very interesting color story, very unique. I've never seen anything quite like this. I have found these shadows to be incredibly long wearing. I have worn them out skating and they didn't melt off of my face. I wore them to a Renaissance festival where it rained part of the time and I didn't have makeup all down my face. Honestly, the longevity of these is pretty impressive, and I think that, you know, it makes that price point more justifiable. So I'm gonna try to wipe this off of my arm. You can see they don't want to leave my arm. Like I said, longevity is really pretty impressive with this. I'm gonna have to get something else because I'm wearing a white shirt. Hang on. All right, cleansing balm took care of that for me. Okay, so I'm kind of thinking about how I want to build this look out. Here's the thing. This palette really gives you, because of the textures and the color payoff, the ability to do really dramatic avant-garde looks, very similar to a lot of the promo photos. But I also think that sometimes when you see those really extravagant looks and stuff, you wonder, would this palette be relatable for me as your everyday consumer who's trying to create eye looks that are not haute couture? So I want to do something, I think, kind of in between. And I also think that this palette, because of the colors and textures, even if you don't do something really wild and out there, it still looks so polished and put together. And the interesting thing, and I think you could kind of see that color story, even though the colors are bright and vivid, there's something about the tone to almost all of them that makes them very wearable at the same time. They're not like a neon that's really going to be difficult to work with. I'm thinking with this palette, I want to show the diversity of using the shade Brass, which is that kind of reddish orange shade, juxtaposed with some of the greens. And I'm thinking my inspiration is almost like a beetle shell, something that's kind of reflecting that kind of reddish tone within the green. So I'm going to start off with the shade Brass and just kind of let it go from there. I don't really know where we're going exactly. We're going though. So I'm going to use a little kind of angled pointed brush. I love this. This is a Chikuhodo, by the way. So I'm going to take that shade Brass, dipping into it. I do find that some of these, because they are a little shimmery, if you're using a brush, they can be, you can have a little bit of fallout. So sometimes like I'll tip my head down while I'm applying these, but we'll just kind of wing it and see. I'm thinking I'm going to drag this kind of up and out from my corner. And then on the outer edges, I'm going to use some of those greenish shades. And then I think I'm also going to use the shade Brass, maybe under my eye. I don't know. Let's just play. You can see a very, very bright, just like gorgeous, like metallic sort of look. And because of the shape of my eye, I'm going to leave my eye kind of open while I do this. I'm going to build that up a little more right through here. And I actually want to carry that color down just a little bit. You can see really not a ton of fallout there, which is nice. I am shaking off my brush just a little bit while I do this. Pull that down a little further. Phase one. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is use some of those greenish metallic shades. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to do a few things actually. I'm going to take the shade Fetish, which is this kind of olive gold shifting shade. I'm going to take just a regular eyeshadow brush. This is from Jones Road. And I'm going to kind of load that up. Any of the little shimmery pieces that I see, just kind of blow those off. And I'm going to go over on the outer edge of my eye here and kind of just hug my lid shape and drag it a bit. And I'm leaving a little bit of space inside because I want to use the shade Grip, which has a more of a bluish shift to it, right next to Brass, just for something interesting. I think I'll pull that up a little bit here so you can see it more. And I'm actually going to create more of like a diagonal shape because I think it's kind of interesting and it flows. We'll blend that out in a minute. Match that up over here. Create almost like a kind of pointed shape. Now we've got this empty space right next to Brass. So I'm going to take a slightly smaller brush. This is also from Jones Road. And I'm going to pick up the shade Grip, which is that green that has more of a bluish shift to it. All right, here is this. And I'm going to snuggle this right up next to Brass so you really get that pop. And then I'm going to feather it into Fetish. I'm not blending brass and grip together, but I am blending grip and fetish. And as you can see, there's really not, there's not a lot of like fallout or anything like that with those shades in particular. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend the outer edges of this a little bit, and then I'll probably go in with that lighter heat, that kind of yellowy, slightly shifting tone, and do that above. All of these just blend so nicely. They're just very soft. Look at that. That took no time at all. There we go. Now I'm gonna just take this and furiously dust it off. And then I'm going to pick up the shade Heat on this kind of loose, fluffy blending brush. This is a Jones Road brush also. And I'm going to start kind of feathering that out under my brow bone, lightly blending it in, and then kind of coming above the shade Brass. Just adds a little extra dimension. This is a really great shade for just some kind of like a soft highlight around your eye. I've actually even worn it by itself. It was really pretty. This is probably the most exciting look I've done in a while. Okay, let me see. What else do I want to do? I want to show you the shade Sweat, which is that kind of like lilac blue shifting shade. Have some on my finger, and I want to use this as a highlight. I think it is so beautiful. The way that it catches the light is really special. It's a special, special shade. All right, under my eyes, actually, before I move on, I'm gonna build up Brass even a little more just because I really want that shade to pop. And I'm probably gonna pull it a little further in. There we go. Get that brightness. Yeah, that's much better. I just pulled it a little further in and kind of rounded it. Much better. I think I want to actually follow with the shade Brass, but more on the outer edge, and maybe even lift up as like a bit of a wing. Loving what that did. Build it up a little more. I want to do something kind of connecting that inner corner. I don't want it to be darker than Brass, so what I think I will do is maybe that sort of olivey shade again, the shade Fetish. And just dip that right here, just a little tiny bit. Make sure there's none to fall off, and really just lightly tap. You get a really nice color payoff with that. I'm gonna take that little, good catch, little kind of domed brush and just merge those two together because I do want that to be a little more soft and blended there. I want to build a little more intensity in my crease, so I'm gonna take a small-ish brush, and I think what I will do, kind of sticking in this shade, like family of greens, is use the shade Motor, which is right next to Grip, and it's like a deeper olive, kind of foresty green shade, and I'm gonna just kind of put that right here. My brush is slightly damp at this point because I had to clean it off, so that'll also build some of the intensity of this particular pigment. I dig it. We'll blend it out a little bit. Just using like a very light kind of feathering tapping motion. And then I'm going to get my blending brush again, dust that off. Avoiding merging brass and motor together. But that way I get a little more intensity on that outer corner. I definitely feel like I've got like the beetle tones going on here, which I'm very into. So now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to use an eyeliner because a lot of times eyeliners conceal my lid space, because when my eyes are open, it's just kind of harder to see my lid space. I have sort of deep set eyes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply Rubber Lash and kind of give you my final thoughts on this palette. I just think it's really cool. Okay, Rubber Lash time. All right, so there is our completed eye look using the Isamaya Industrial palette. I also applied Rubber Lash, which if you didn't see my review for that, I will put a link up there for you to tap to watch, and you can also see Lip Black and kind of my initial thoughts with those. I do hope that this Rubber Lash will kind of dry out a little bit, because for some reason it seems to smudge on me, and it's unfortunate because I think it's a really beautiful mascara, and I love that you can use like the little tiny tip of it. It has these little bitty bristles, and you can make like kind of spiky lower lashes, which I love so much. But for whatever reason, this does seem to smudge on me. Kind of my overall thoughts on the Industrial palette. I freaking love it. I just think it is such a fun, unique palette. I've never seen anything quite like this before, with those textures and the shades. And because I'm using natural lighting while I film, I'm also going to put a picture right here in different lighting so you can see how different lights will catch those metallic pigments differently too. But honestly, I just think that this is such a beautiful, fun palette. If you have the room and your budget to splurge a little bit, I think it's a really fun purchase, and it's one that I will be using quite a bit. If you want to see more looks from this palette, make sure you're following me on Instagram, because I do post reels on there with different makeup looks that I do. Like I said before, this is the most expensive palette I have ever bought, and I thankfully had like some birthday money to be able to throw at this. If you've been feeling bored with makeup, you've been feeling bored with palettes, and you just really want to break out of that and kind of test your creative genius a bit, buy this. You'll love it. I think it's fantastic. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to give a little thumbs up. That does help other people find my channel and this video. And if you want to see more from me, make sure that you hit the subscribe button, and I will see you around. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.